Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom, I'm David Mencer, Israeli government spokesman. Welcome to today's briefing. Please put your questions in the chat and we'll get to each one of them after a very quick update from me. It's Tuesday, the 10th of September, day 340 of the October 7th war. First, an operational update from Gaza. Overnight, following IDF intelligence, the Israeli Air Force conducted a precise strike on senior Hamas terrorists. Now, these terrorists were operating within a command and control center embedded inside the humanitarian area in Khan Yunis. Among the important, significant terrorists we targeted and hit were Samer Ismail Qadar Abu Daka. He was head of Hamas's aerial unit in Gaza. Osama Tabesh, he was head of the Observation and Targets Department in Hamas's military intelligence headquarters. And Ayman Makbouh, a senior Hamas terrorist. All three were targeted and all three were hit during this operation. The government can confirm these terrorists were directly involved in the October 7th massacre, not indirectly connected. They were directly involved. In addition, they recently carried out terror attacks against the IDF and the State of Israel. Let me share with you the details in this instance of our ongoing mission to always keep civilians out of harm's way. Firstly, prior to this strike, extensive intelligence was gathered. Secondly, there was continuous aerial surveillance in the hours leading up to this strike. And thirdly, the aerial images confirmed the presence of the terrorists in the area alongside other terrorists. Now to the way this incident was reported. I've seen figures of 40 dead, 50 dead in some media. According to the IDF's initial review, the numbers published by the Hamas-run Government Information Office in Gaza, which, by the way, time and time again has consistently broadcast fake news and false information. Sometimes it's called the Data Information Office, sometimes it's called the Civilian Defense Office. Once again, their reports this time, sadly often parroted by many in the media, did not align with the truth relating to the data held by the IDF regarding the precise munitions used and the accuracy of the strike. Now, the IDF has in the past, and again this time, used extensive measures to get Gazans to move away from the combat zone. That's the reason we designate humanitarian areas. This is in direct contrast to the Hamas terrorist organization that embeds itself and its operatives and military infrastructure inside humanitarian areas and systematically uses Gazan civilians as human shields for its terrorist activities. Now, to make this point even clearer, let me share with you some of Yahya Sinwar's, the Hamas leader's, actual words. He talks about actually weaponizing Gazans against Israel. So these were his actual words, stated words, as reported in the Wall Street Journal. In messages sent to mediators by the terror leader, Sinwar says that as far as he's concerned, the more civilians that die in Gaza, the better. In his own words, he says he sees such deaths as working, in his own words, to his advantage. In another on-the-record interview, Sinwar says, "We make the headlines only with blood. No blood, no news." In other words, Sinwar has again been reported by the Wall Street Journal saying that high civilian casualties place global pressure on Israel. Now, the Prime Minister has made clear very many times that Hamas must be held responsible for the double war crime it commits every day by deliberately targeting Israeli civilians while using Palestinian civilians as human shields. And finally, on to COGAT and their work coordinating aid into Gaza. As of today, Israel has facilitated over 50,000 trucks worth of aid and close to 1 million tons of aid into Gaza since the start of this war. Throughout this war, Israel has prevented the humanitarian crisis that Hamas wanted in Gaza. So we've sent in daily, practically unlimited quantities of essential aid for Gazans, food, medication, vaccines, all transferred following a security inspection to make sure and to prevent weapons from getting into the hands of terrorists. On the polio campaign, the third stage of the polio vaccination campaign in northern Gaza began today. Approximately 70,000 children under the age of 10 will be receiving the vaccine in designated health centres and clinics. And later today, the daily assessment will be held together with our partners from the World Health Organization and UNICEF. Clearly, Hamas wants an outbreak of polio, and Israel has prevented one. So that's the end of our briefing here today. I will now take your questions, which you should put in the chat together with your news outlet. First question here I can see is from Hannah Julian. A few minutes ago, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken blamed the IDF for the death last week of a Turkish-American activist linked to the International Solidarity Movement who was involved in a clash between stone throwers and IDF soldiers in Beta. Blinken said this was the second American killed at the hands of the IDF, and the US plans to demand the IDF change its rules of engagement as a result. Can you comment? Thank you for that question, Hannah. We haven't got anything further than that. It sounds particularly as it's a question for the IDF, so please put that question directly to the IDF. Next question from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Could you kindly clarify once more how many people the IDF believes were killed in the strike on Hamas operatives in Khan Yunis separately? Do you know if the crater depicted in news reports was in fact caused by the airstrike? Thank you for that question, Joel. I shared with you 3 terrorists that were killed. We targeted them. I shared with you those 3 terrorists were directly involved, not indirectly, directly involved in the October 7th massacre, the evil massacre which was inflicted on our people, the same evil which made Hamas execute our 6 hostages in their custody just last week. If you want further information on other casualties, the IDF will be coming out with them shortly. And you ask about the crater. Again, the IDF has produced some details of the strike, and more details will be coming out shortly. Just to say on this point, there is a familiar pattern to these things. The outrage, a headline is put out in the international media, giving vastly inflated figures of casualties. The IDF puts out the correct figure and our target, and then obviously, by the time the IDF has put out the correct information, the damage has been done in the international media. The false narrative has taken hold. It's gone halfway around the world, as the old adage says, that a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth has actually put its boots on. And this is a familiar pattern which we've seen during this war. So it is extremely important that media do not report Hamas figures, because they are invariably, as we have shown again today, incorrect. They are invariably lies. This practically cooperates with the Hamas objective to enlarge the number of civilian casualties, which is always very far from the truth, especially when Gaza are prepared to fight until the last Gazan civilian. And Israel is trying its hardest, more than any other nation on earth, more than any other army has in the history of armed conflict, to get civilians out of harm's way and to go for the terrorist targets, even though they embed themselves in civilian areas. Next question here is from Fred Ager. You write that Shin Bet warns of a rise of West Bank suicide bombing, suggests to tackle the threats by increased prison cells, undercover units, illegal entry crackdowns, increased tech surveillance and units' presence on the roads and other protecting the Jordanian border. Does the Prime Minister and Defence Minister Gallant have they already taken steps to implement Shin Bet's recommendation? Thank you for that question, Fred. Let me share with you what our Foreign Minister has said just this morning, actually. He said that the Iranian terror octopus is working to establish an eastern terror front against Israel. And the Foreign Minister also said that moderate states in the region are also being targeted. He obviously was talking about Jordan and Egypt. And the Foreign Minister said that we must cut off the octopus's tentacles. He also shared with us a quote from Ayatollah Khamenei, the Iranian supreme leader, who says that he wants the West Bank to be armed just like Gaza. So look, Israel is very aware of the uptick in violence in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. We were taken by surprise on October 7th by the invasion of Hamas, but we will not be surprised again. Israel has made clear, and the Prime Minister has reiterated this point, that Israel is operating decisively to ensure that the reality that existed prior to the murderous and horrific attacks by Hamas terrorists on October 7th will never repeat themselves. Our policy is extremely clear. There will be no safe place, no places of sanctuary, nowhere, no places where the terrorists can feel safe, where they feel they're in control. So we've carried out targeted operations in the last 10 days or so to thwart terrorist activity in Samaria. The IDF and the security forces are operating in the Hebron region. I shared that with you yesterday, and in other towns in Samaria, Tulkarem, Jenin, and other places from which these murderous attacks have been launched. We will fight to eliminate terrorism from wherever it emerges. The Prime Minister has made clear that we know that Iran is working to make this another front with which to attack Israel. But Israel is, of course, on high alert. Our security forces are deployed extensively to thwart terror attacks, and we will settle accounts with any terrorists responsible for terrorist attacks against our people. Prime Minister has made clear that we've exposed and dismantled explosives planted underneath the road to be detonated in attacks against our security forces operating in the area. And we know that these are straight out of the Iranian playbook deployed against coalition forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. Again, we've also confiscated weapons. We've exposed and dismantled explosives, also planted under roads in the area. So as I mentioned before that we were taken by surprise on October 7th. We will not be surprised again. We know that the reality that existed prior to these murderous invasion by Hamas on October 7th will never repeat themselves. Our policy is clear. There will be no safe place, no places of sanctuary for these terrorists, and our targeted operations in Jenin and Tulkarem and other places in Samaria will thwart the next terrorist invasion of our towns and villages and cities. You will have seen that by arrests taken place yesterday on Highway number 6. Because it's precisely from these places, in Tulkarem and other places, that these murderous attacks have been launched. You should be in no doubt that Iran and their proxies in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, will face the IDF and they will be eliminated. The IDF's made that clear. We know that Iran is working to make this another front with which to attack us here in Israel, but we will not let that happen. Okay, no other questions from what I can see. So thank you for joining us here today. The next briefing will be tomorrow at the same time, 3:30 Jerusalem time. So in the meantime, please do stay safe and thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.